Welcome back to the Great Detour. Today's episode is one that truly highlights the power of perseverance and transformation. I'm sharing the story of my friend Dan Carazo, a dedicated endurance athlete with an inspiring story. Dan's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. He's overcome challenges that would bring most people to their knees and has turned those experiences into a life filled with purpose, resilience, and inspiration. From battling addiction to crossing finish lines in triathlons, his story is a powerful reminder of what's possible when we refuse to give up on ourselves. We'll be diving into his training, races, and the life lessons that have shaped him into the person he is today. Get ready to feel inspired by this incredible comeback story. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Great Detour podcast. I'm your host, Jess. If there's one thing I've learned about life, it's that it's full of twists and turns, and oftentimes a pretty big detour, or two. Sometimes these unexpected paths lead us to a life better than we ever imagined, and other times they give us the hardest lessons we never wanted to learn. But almost always, they leave us changed. Join me and my guests as we explore life's unplanned paths and learn from stories of growth, resilience, and transformation. Welcome to today's episode. I have quite the detour story for you. With me, I have my friend, Dan Carazo. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jess. Glad to be here.
I met Dan in my local running club, and I actually interviewed the founder of that running club, Matt Carnegie, in episode 3, and we talked about the transformative power of community and movement. And Dan is one of the many incredible members of that community. Not only is he a formidable endurance athlete, he's also just an amazing person, and he has a comeback story like none other. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, the comeback is always stronger than the setback, but he truly embodies that. So I'm so excited for him to dig into his story today. But before we do, I would just like to make note that it is Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and we are recording. And if it was left up to Dan, it would have been 10 a.m. But that is because Dan is busy. He has a bunch of upcoming races that he's preparing and training for. So Dan, I'd love to start off by you telling us a little bit about what races you have coming up and what your training schedule looks like.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, you just hyped me up to like the highest mountains possible. And like now I feel like I really have to perform.
No pressure.
No pressure. Thank you for that intro. This is like a pinch me moment. First of all, like it's very surreal. And sometimes I'm like, am I going to wake up from this dream? Like, is this all real? And I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure this is all real. Yeah. So what upcoming races do I have? So last year I did my first Ironman. Half Ironman. There's a big difference between a half Ironman and a full Ironman.
Tell us what that is.
Great question. A half Ironman is a triathlon, which is run, bike, and swim. So first you swim 1.2 miles, then you bike 56 miles, and then you run a half marathon which is 13.1 miles. The total mileage at the end is 70.3 miles. That's why it's called an Ironman 70.3.
Wow.
So I did my first last year.
How did that feel crossing the finish line?
So I knew you were going to ask that question, and believe it or not, so it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It took me 5 hours and 25 minutes. It was a really shitty day. Okay. So it was at Jones Beach and it was pouring rain. It was super windy. Like, honestly, crossing the finish line, you would think that like my response is going to be that it was like the best day of my life, but It wasn't. It was not my best race ever. And like people don't know this because like from social media, you see like the finishing pictures and you see all like the good highlights and all that. But it was like one of my worst races. I joked to my friends that showed up, which was awesome, by the way. I had 2 members of Dubstep actually came, which was like so cool. I had a bunch of like personal friends come too, and it was like really, really like nice to see them after I crossed that finish line. But internally, I was disappointed. I wanted to do better and I didn't. And I just wasn't in a good headspace like that day. And the whole thing sucked.
Well, you know what? I appreciate the honesty about that, but you're going back for more. So are you setting a higher bar for yourself for these next races?
Yeah. So I did that half Ironman, which was like, it's like an amazing accomplishment, 5 hours and 25 minutes of like constantly going at it. And I am doing another half Ironman this year, but I just want to touch on my best and favorite race of last year, which was the New York City half, which is actually coming up again in March. It's a half marathon, and I ran a 1:26:44. And if you ask me how I felt when I crossed that finish line, I don't know if I cried, but I felt like crying. Okay. And I don't know if you can relate to that experience, but I mean, yes, it was quote unquote only a half marathon, but I mean, I put my heart out there.
Yeah.
I dug deep. I couldn't have had a better race. It was so surreal. It was another one of those pinch me moments. Like,
Yeah.
did I just run a 1:26:44? I've been running for 3 years.
Yeah.
What just happened? So that was my favorite race.
That was the reaction you wanted for your Ironman.
100%. And that's like the reaction that I want from like every race if I can. It's like, and it's all relative to me. Like you can go out and run a half marathon if 2 hours is like way beyond anything you thought possible, then that you're going to be like, oh my God, what did I just do? Right.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for me for that half Ironman. It was like, who am I? Like, what did I do? How did I do that?
Just a very proud moment, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember I saw the videos recently. You know how like iPhone will show you like memories? It'll like, hey, look at this day.
Yeah.
I have like videos at the end I recorded like a video of myself just like talking to myself and being like, what just happened? like borderline teary-eyed, just like, what is life right now? Because we'll get into that later.
I love that you did that. That's amazing. I think it's really important to savor those moments. I feel like so many times we can get so stuck and focused on the things that are going wrong in our lives. And then when we have these amazing achievements or celebratory moments, we're so quick to pass over them. So I love that you took a moment and recorded it. And I think, whenever you're having a tough day, maybe refer back to that video and just like capture a little bit of that energy that you had in that moment and allow it to propel you forward, because those moments are so, so special. We need to savor them.
Yeah, I wish I'd take more videos. I need to start taking, even after like just a regular workout, like, yeah, I did that. Let's remember this moment.
Yeah. I think it's important to set those reminders and keep cheering yourself on. I think we expect other people to cheer us on, but it's important to cheer ourselves on.
Yeah, no, that's true. All like anyone can say anything about me, right? That doesn't mean I'll believe it or it'll make me happy, right?
Yeah.
Like the intro you gave me, you can say that, and whether I believe it or not is like a completely different story that dictates how I'll feel about what you just said, right?
Well, it's
like
true.
People
so believe it.
No, it to an extent, but it's still like at the end of the day, I'm just a guy. I'm just a normal guy. I sleep on that bed right there. Like I put my head on the pillow the same way you do or anyone else does. I wake up, I have my thoughts. Like I'm just as human as anyone else.
Exactly. And we're all just on our own journeys and have our own stories. And that's what this podcast is all about, is sharing those stories, because I know that there are so many people who are going through different challenges in their lives right now and can relate to it. So I think this is a good transition point. So everything you're talking about, these Ironman races and incredible things that you're doing, they're really quite remarkable given where you came from. So I know that addiction played a large role in your story. So I would love if you could take us back to the years, preceding now, and tell us what that looked like, and tell us a little bit about that story, and then we'll transition into how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, that's a good point, because what I just heard out of what you said is like why, Dan? Why do an Ironman?
Yes.
Why run? Why do you do this? So yeah, addiction is definitely a part of my story in life, and is the reason why I sort of do all of this. Not like the sole reason, but it's a huge part of it. It's a humongous part of it. So yeah, just to give you like a brief story of me, and this is where it's like pinch me now, is what we're about to say real? I don't even know where to start, but addiction is like a progressive disease, right? For me, it started with just smoking weed like in high school, right?
Yeah.
And instantly it turned into like I had like this aha moment where it was like, I love this, right? I love this. Never in school was I like, I want to be an athlete or I want to be on a team. Like sure I had like anxiety and self-esteem issues and whatnot, but like smoking pot was just like, this is sick. Let's do this all the time. But it spiraled really quickly for me. It progressed onto like harder drugs. And to make a long story short, by the time I was 18, I was pretty addicted to painkillers, right? I was pretty addicted to painkillers. Like this train of addiction that I was on, like at first it was like I was riding a horse, right? And then it turned on to like a bullet train. And it just went from like 0 to 100 really fast.
Wow. Did you realize that it was happening while it was happening? Or was it just one day you woke up and said, oh my gosh, what is my life now?
Fantastic question, because I was brutally aware of like what I was doing, which makes it so much worse, right? Like I was in denial for a little bit. Like in the beginning, I remember, I blamed my mom. Like if my mom would just smoke weed, like life would be fine. She just doesn't get it, right? She just doesn't get it. No one gets it. Like it's everyone else's fault. But then eventually I couldn't like keep lying to myself. And I realized that maybe I do have a problem, but I don't care, right? I don't care, right? F it. Those are the most dangerous words in my vocabulary are F it, right? To anything. So I was aware that I was like headed down a bad road, but I didn't really care. And I was, and I don't know, I just didn't care. Like there's just so like I wish I could just give you like a USB like wire to just plug in and you could be like, oh my, because there's just so much to unpack, and it's like sort of, it's a lot. Like I'm the most open book. It's just different on like, a permanent record like this.
No, of course. And look, you share as much as you're comfortable sharing, but I'm curious for you, was there ever a moment when you realized like, man, I gotta make a change, or a rock bottom moment that shook you awake?
Yeah. So there's two, and that's what I was sort of going to get to. So 18, I started, like, I was painfully aware that I was addicted to painkillers. I couldn't go a day without it. Like, it was just like every single day, that's all I thought about. I went to bed and I thought about how I'm going to do it tomorrow. It was a full-time job, right? It was like, it was literally like, it was a full-time job with overtime that you're not getting paid for and no benefits. Like it just sucked, right? No, but I was addicted.
Yeah, and I wonder, I know you said you didn't care, but were there any moments where you were scared at all?
Not really, believe it or not. No, I was never really afraid. I don't know why. I mean, sure, like to an extent, I was clearly not afraid enough to stop, right? Yeah. Like clearly. But so yeah, 18, I knew I had a really serious problem, and like drugs for me just become like priority, or at least that's what happened. Like nothing else mattered. And pretty much by the time I was 20, I pretty much lost everything. So this is where it's so crazy. It's like, how did you just ride your bike for 2 hours and 10 minutes this morning based off what you're about to say? So I'm 20 years old, pretty much homeless by choice, right? It was the easier, softer way to accomplish my goals, which was just to continue using. It was the middle of the winter, which sucks, by the way, in South Yonkers, which sucks, by the way. I was just tired, man. I was just like really tired. So I'm most susceptible to change when I'm like in a lot of pain. And I was in a lot of pain. I'd done a lot of dirt to my friends and family. I was all alone. I had literally nothing. I had absolutely nothing. All of this in front of me like didn't exist. I had nothing. So I'd always had like the energy to sort of go do what I have to do to get more, right? I always had this, whether it was a flame or like just a candle, I always had energy. But I was just tired and I just wanted to rest. There's this abandoned building that people used in, right? And I mean, this building it's abandoned because it was like burnt down. So just imagine, like we gutted this house. We ripped the sheetrock off. We took the copper pipes out and like sold them.
Wow.
So I just wanted to rest. So I go and I knew there was a mattress on the 3rd floor, and I go in there and like, I'm sad and I'm depressed. Like I just wanted some peace in my life. I didn't want to think about how am I going to get more money? How am I going to get more money? And I go into this room, and it was like, this is how I remember it. It was like, the room was disgusting, like disgusting. But there was this like nightstand that was clean for whatever reason. And sitting on top of that nightstand was like a pocket-sized blue AA book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had been to rehab like a bunch of times, like a whole bunch of times. So I knew what that book was, and I believed that that was a solution to my problem, right? And it was just like a God shot. It was like it's like a message. It's like, dude, like hang it up, go home, like
Yeah.
let's stop, let's take a break or change, like whatever. I always say that like I wish I could end this story there and say, like, like end it like a Disney movie, and that
Yeah.
was it. He lived happily ever after, and he never got high again. But that's not my story.
Yeah.
But what I just described is what I describe as like my physical bottom. I had no money, I had no phone, I had no car, I had no friends. I was physically like destroyed. But for whatever reason, it wasn't enough.
Mhm.
It wasn't enough. I did get help for like a little bit, maybe stayed clean for like a year, but I still wasn't done. I still wasn't done. From 20 to 26 were like the saddest, most depressing days of my life. Like it was so bad. And it was different because I had things for those 6 years. I had a car that I probably totaled. I did. I totaled like 6 cars. I had money, I had things sort of. I had a phone. I wasn't wandering the streets of South Yonkers in the middle of the winter, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Which sort of made it like more painful, I think.
Hmm.
I remember towards the end, the only way I can describe it is crippling depression. I've heard the term thrown around, right? Whether it be on movies or TV, but I never experienced it and I never sort of knew what it meant
Yeah.
until those last years. I had no energy to do anything. I mean, when they say crippling, it was crippling. I felt like I didn't have the energy to like walk up a flight of stairs. Like I had to use the
Wow.
railing. I was so,
Depleted.
yeah, I was just, and this is what I call, I guess, like a spiritual bottom, right?
Yeah.
I had some material things, but like emotionally and spiritually, like I pretty much went to bed like every night in like borderline crying, if not, or like couldn't go to bed
Yeah.
rather, right? Because I was just so in my head about the storm I had created. So I guess you're probably wondering like what happened, like so what was like the turning point? And
Yeah. I mean, the book obviously was a Kickstarter or another Kickstarter. It sounded like, you had several starts and I actually really love that you admit that it's not this fairy tale story where I saw this book and I went to rehab and I got clean. Because isn't that life? Like sometimes you have to fall down and then you have to fall down and then you fall down again. But I think it's the truth strength comes from continuing to get up every time you fall down. And you've really done that.
yeah, so my whole story of addiction is just constant relapse, if you can even call it that, because I never really gave it a shot. So that's why I'm sometimes hesitant to say that, oh, I relapsed, because I was
Mhm.
never really trying,
Yeah.
like maybe a day or a couple days, but never was I like, I'm giving it my all right now,
Yeah.
right? Until now.
So what made you want to give it your all? And what point was that?
Yeah. So I remember clear as day being asked this question by one of my cousins. She was like, what had changed? Like,
Yeah.
what happened? What was it? Right. And the only answer I could come up with was, and this is like sort of like, I don't know, but my answer was once the pain outweighed the pleasure. And look, it wasn't pleasurable for like a long time, but the pain just wasn't great enough. I was just, it was that, but I also needed the local police department to
Another motivator.
yeah. I got in trouble and there was like legal stuff hanging over my head,
Mhm.
which was like the option was like stop and like, do those consequences or go to jail.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I'm not going to jail. And this is so crazy. I remember like the day I got arrested, which is like so crazy to say. I remember feeling relief. I remember feeling, and I remember like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do, but usually you're not supposed to talk and you're supposed to like, shut up until you speak to your lawyer.
Yeah.
I full on admitted, like, yeah, I did it. I'm
Wow.
done. The show's up. Take me.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I want rest. I want peace.
You were ready.
Yeah, I just needed something, some like divine intervention to come and push me in that direction. And that's exactly what happened. There's like so many other details and like things like ups and downs, but that's like the gist of it, which is why it's so crazy because never was the plan to like start running
Mhm.
or biking or swimming or eating healthy or any of that. It actually started because, I'm sober now and I got a job because now that's something you could do when you're sober, right?
Yeah.
You're employable, right? Who would have thought?
There's a lot of things that could
there's a
become
lot of
available
things, right?
to you. Yeah.
So I got this job and I bought a bike not for like physical fitness. I didn't really know what a triathlon was. Like, I guess I did, but like, I didn't really know. I didn't really know what an iron, like none of those words were in my vocabulary.
Yeah. Was it just like a mental or outlet for you?
Exactly. I was like, you know what? I'm sober now. I have free time. Let's buy a bike and ride a bike in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
How peaceful does that sound?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I'm like,
what a great
let's
outlet
do that.
for all that pent up energy. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm like, let's do that. And one of my coworkers was a triathlete and she's like, come ride with us. Come ride with my group ride on a Tuesday night. And I'm like, sure. And for whatever reason, I found that so attractive. I was like, that is cool as shit.
Yeah.
Like, this is sick. And that sort of like kickstarted it. I was like, I didn't make a decision like, oh, I'm going to be a triathlete. I'm going to do a half Ironman. But I was like, I can sort of like make this part of my life.
Yeah.
And, from one addiction to another, it just went from like the same thing. I mean, I have like a super addictive personality and I took it to the extreme. I started running every day. I started, I hired a coach for triathlons. I committed to a half Ironman.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting about an addictive personality. I've heard people refer to that before. Is that what you think it is? Because I know everybody who struggles with addiction, there's different whys behind it. Do you think it's the way you were wired? Or do you think there were just other factors in there that kind of pulled you into addiction in the first place?
I believe that I've always been wired this way. I think like if maybe I played sports in high school, that maybe I wouldn't have went down that Great Detour, right?
See
Nice,
what you
right?
did there, like that.
Yeah. But I think I've always had an extremely addictive personality, like, and like just training and triathlons and whatever it is, it's just like I can hyper focus on it, and I do. Like, I could tell you my workouts for the rest of the week. I could tell you my workouts for the rest of the month. It's like I'm playing a video. I love video games, right?
Yeah.
And I love focusing on like the stats of like the character, like the intellect and the haste and the critical strike, whatever, right? And it's like, but now it's like I'm the video game and I'm the character, and like I'm doing like real things to myself to beat my boss, right?
Exactly.
Like, my boss is like, I would love to run. Well, first of all, my biggest goal is I want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and it's going to happen. It's a matter whether that happens this year, next year. It's going to happen, and we're going to go even further than that. But I think that would be so cool. Just from like that kid who like couldn't walk up the stairs without holding the rail because he was so depressed, to like qualifying for the Boston Marathon, running a sub 3 hour what?
That's absolutely incredible. Do you ever like take those moments when you're training now to stop and really reflect on how far you've come and where you came from?
Probably every single training session. Every single training session. I think that everyone, and that's sort of like my why as to like, sobriety has given me like a brand new life and like a purpose, right? And so has running and training. It gives me like a purpose. So I feel like no one just signs up for a marathon or even a 5K. Like, there's always a why. And I think whatever that why is like super important, because if you really believe in that why, like, you'll make it to that finish line. You'll accomplish whatever goal you want to accomplish. And my why is like, I was a junkie and now I'm not. And I tell myself that all the time when I'm like racing, like, because you compare yourself, like the dude to the left and right of you, you're like, damn, is he faster than me? Yeah. This, that, like, what is he digging into? What is he digging into? I just dig into that, like, dude, I had nothing. I don't care what you lost. I lost everything. Like, whatever your why isn't as good as mine. My why is better, and I'm going to show you, and I'm going to dig deep, and I'm going to dust you, right? And that's how I felt. That's how I felt at that New York City half. Yeah. Like, I was just like, you're in it. The Ironman, though, I was like, Let it make it end. Please make it end. This is so brutal.
But I give you so much credit though. You did it and it wasn't what you wanted it to be. And you kept going. And I feel like that's what we have to do in life. Like we try and we put ourselves out there and it's not always going to pan out the way we want, but that shouldn't demotivate us from trying again and trying to reach our goals because it's not always a bed of roses. I was just talking about this in another episode where when you're on your path and when you're stepping into your purpose, I think there's this misconception that sometimes things are going to be easy because you're in alignment. And it's not necessarily. There's still challenges and you still have to work at it. But I think it just makes it, I don't know, so much more worth it. And then when you do hit that point, oh my God, it's like the sweetest feeling ever.
100%. There's nothing better than doing something really hard that you don't want to do. I think it's so important to do hard things. And it doesn't have to be like athletics at all. Like there could be a really hard conversation you don't want to have with someone. Dude, have that conversation. The amount of relief that you'll feel after it is like indescribable. But I think it's also really important to do hard things when it comes to like working out too.
Yeah.
Like people think like, oh, you did a half Ironman. Like training is easy for you. It's not easy for you. When I'm doing a workout, I'm thinking of like the first interval and the last interval. I'm not I'm just like, all right, like this morning, 2 hours and 10 minutes, I broke it down into like 30-minute segments. I'm like, I just want to focus on the first 30 minutes, try to get lost for the next hour and a half, and then it's over. And that's sort of what I do.
That's why you have to look at life too, I think. If you look at the big picture, it's so overwhelming and it can be so easy just to give up. But I feel like you just have to look at the first few steps in front of you and say, okay, I've got to do X, Y, and Z. And then after that, the next steps will reveal themselves. And I'm sure as you were in your recovery journey, that was probably the case too, right? It was probably really overwhelming, I imagine, on day one to think about being sober. But how did that feel for you when you really started? And that last time when you entered your final sobriety journey, like, were you overwhelmed by it? Like, what did it feel like for you?
Like when I got arrested, I was so relieved.
Yeah.
It was like I was walking around with this 100-pound backpack and like, I could have taken it off at any time.
Yeah.
It was like, no one tied it to me. I like put it on. Right. And I'm the only one that could take it off. And like life was I was just free. And what you were saying, like breaking things down, like there's a really popular saying, it's like one day at a time, right? Like specifically with recovery, but anything you're going through.
Yeah.
And like, I still refer to that all the time. Let me just try to do a good job today, right? Like, that's it. Let's just like, if we can beat yesterday, great. If we can match yesterday, good. If we do worse than yesterday, tomorrow's a new day, right? Yeah.
I love the grace that you give yourself too. I feel like I personally have such a tendency to be hard on myself. And if I have a rough day where I'm not performing to the level that I would like to, it's so easy for me to like beat myself up. But I love that mentality of like, okay, I gave it my best shot today, not my best day. We try again tomorrow. It's a new day.
Yeah, I try, but I also lose sight. Like it's easy for me to say right now, but trust me, I have my moments where I'm like, life sucks. The world's ending.
Yeah.
Like, screw it. Turn the lights off. I don't want to get out of bed. Whatever. I'm not working out today. But that's one thing I always do. And you mentioned like, when I was doing the Half Ironman, like that I didn't quit. I can't remember the last time I quit something since I've been sober. Sure, I'll do a terrible job at it, but I won't quit. I just can't. Just do your best. Just do your best, right?
Yeah.
That's it. And 5 hours and 25 minutes was my best that day.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but it's okay.
I think it's absolutely incredible because I would not be out there doing that. But I completely understand what you're saying. Tell me now what your life looks like. You started off with this crazy addiction journey. Then you found triathlons and biking and got into that. And now you're in a whole new chapter of your life. So how do you feel now? But also, do you ever look back and how does the journey that you've taken make you view yourself and view the potential that you have?
Yeah, good question. So I feel almost like indestructible, if you know what I mean. Like, what can possibly happen that's worse?
Yeah.
You tell me. Like, I don't care if I lose my legs. I don't care if I get into a car accident. I don't care if I lose X, Y, and Z. Like, so what?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Awesome. Like, let's keep moving. It's weird. I was saying this last night because I've been sober for over 3 years now.
It's incredible.
And, I'm 29 years old, right? But I don't feel 29 at all. I feel like I'm 21. I feel like I've only been an adult for like 3 years, because those years of like using, like, I was just a shell of a human being.
Mm.
I was not living life. I wasn't. And I really want to shout out Dubset. I friggin' love, dude, I friggin' love, there hasn't been a single Tuesday night run that I've gone to and came home and just felt like extra grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with like last night. It's like with there was a holiday party. It's like more of like those pinch me, like, it's just such a beautiful thing. Like, the first time I went to Dubset, not that it was like super small, but it was a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It was like maybe 15 people, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like there's probably like 30 people in one person's house last night, and these runs are like maybe pushing 50 people sometimes. It's just grown so much, and it's so cool to see people who have like just this common interest to want to run, or just to want to be better, or just that sense of community. Like, I go to these Tuesday night runs, and I hope Matt doesn't hate me, but I don't run, right? I walk.
Yeah, you do.
And I lead the walkers. And like, I'm not running at all. I'm not getting a workout in, but I friggin' love it.
Yes.
Like, I literally get back in the car and I'm like, this is awesome. This is so cool. But yeah, so my life now, it's like, I feel like I've only been alive for like 3 years, which is like good and bad.
You're a different person now, right?
Oh my God. If we could throw up some like pictures on here, you'd be like, what the hell?
But isn't it interesting to look back on those different, I mean, I do it too, the different versions and iterations of myself. And some of them, I'll be honest, I don't like. I look back on those versions of myself and I just have so much compassion for her, because you only know what you know when you know it. So I love just looking at growth in my life and seeing how far I've come. And I imagine it must be the same for you, because 3 years ago, like, you were in such an incredibly different place. And now you just spent 2.5 hours riding a bike this morning. And now you're recording a podcast interview and you're going to be doing all these races coming up.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different chapter of your life, but one that is just so inspiring.
You put something on Instagram the other day, and I remember I replied to it, and I was like, I felt like this spoke to me. And by the way, I was up at 3:30 in the morning that day. Like, I didn't sleep good. Like, we were off to like a bad day, right?
Yeah.
We like, it could have been a bad day. And I think it said, and I might fumble this, but it was like, maybe the mountain that like is put in front of you was put in place so that you can teach someone else how to climb it.
Yes.
Right. And I was like, Dan, like, chill out, dude. Like, let's snap back to reality. Okay. Let's remember where we've been. And, maybe that's like part of my purpose. And I do believe that. Like, I love the fact that I can be an example that like it's possible.
Exactly.
If you're struggling, like I was struggling, right? I'm not struggling anymore. I made a decision that like I was sort of done, and that's it. Life is just like, if you could take a screenshot with like your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, what I took a screenshot 4 years ago, right? And it showed like just everything in my life. It would have been so bare, right? If you take a screenshot today, like I'm saying, these headphones didn't exist. This shirt didn't exist. The hat didn't exist. The running shoes, the triathlon bike, the wetsuit, like the friends, the credit cards, whatever. Like none of it existed. None of it existed. And I only have what I have today because I'm sober. Like, it's crazy.
Could you have imagined it when you were in the throes of addiction?
No. If present day screenshot, if you would have showed me that on day one of sobriety, I'd have been like, nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Like, he looks good. He has nice things. Like, that's a beautiful life, but I don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And things just sort of fell into place. Like, I didn't really, sure, I tried, I put work in, but I never like had this elaborate plan.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the end of this year is going to look like. I have no idea.
Yeah. And that's,
I'm
I
just,
think that's the beauty of life, though, is we don't know what's on the other side. And sometimes it can be challenging for sure. But I also believe, like we talked about throughout this episode, is pain can be such a catalyst for positive things. It can be such a catalyst for tremendous growth in your life. And I think that you did it. I've done it. So many people have done it, where you take the pain and the struggle and you kind of alchemize it and turn it into gold. You've really done that. You took all the pain and all the struggle and you've turned it into something beautiful that I think is going to touch and inspire so many people who are listening to this.
Yeah, I think pain is like the only motivator. I don't know if there's another catalyst.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sort of dealing with a running injury, and the same thing applies. It's like, once I'm in enough pain, then I'll call the doctor, right? But until I'm in enough pain, like, I'll suffer, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with addiction. I just had to be in enough pain until I was like, all right, it's time. I actually want help, and I'm done.
Yeah. Well, Dan, this has been such an incredible conversation. I would like to close with one final question for you. If you're looking back on the younger version of yourself who was really in the throes of addiction and in a really, really dark chapter, is there anything, knowing what you know now, that you would say to him?
Oh my gosh. Like, hang on, kid. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But hey, and that's life, dude. Like, life is a roller coaster, right? I have learned that. There's moments where, like, I'm on a wooden roller coaster and I'm hanging on for dear life. And then there's moments where I'm on, like, the newest modern roller coaster and I'm loving every drop, my hands up in the air. You just don't give up, though. You just, like, no matter what, just keep hanging on. That's it.
Exactly. The two come together, the struggle, but also like the beautiful moments too. So life comes along with both, right?
Yeah. And hang on when you think like, this is the end. I promise you, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Even if you can't see it, just, you'll be all right.
Well, this took so much bravery and so much courage. I commend you for your vulnerability and sharing your story. I think that your resilience and your commitment to yourself and never giving up on yourself is probably the biggest lesson we can all take away from this and apply to any challenge that we're facing in our lives, is just to never give up on yourself. So thank you for not giving up on yourself, because we're all benefiting from it.
Yeah. And thank you, Jess, for having me, because this is new to me. Like I said, I'm an open book, like, to put it out there. I'm happy I can do it, though. And this truly is another, like I'll get off this. I'm like, what just happened? Like, I can't believe we just, like, this is real life.
It is real life.
Real.
It's happening. Well, best of luck to you and all your upcoming races. And thank you again, Dan.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Great Detour. If you like what you're hearing, I'd love if you could leave a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a detour story of your own, you can send it to mystory@thegreatdetour.com or shoot me a message at The Great Detour on Instagram. Thanks for taking this journey with me.